World. Hey, ladies, welcome back to the Purpose Beyond Motherhood podcast. My name is Holly, and we're so glad you're here. I have Nicole with me. Hi, Nicole.
Hey, Holly.
And we have another Nicole here with us, guys. Can you say hi,
Hi.
Nicole?
Hi.
Okay, I'm going to let 1212 Nicole tell you about our new friend, Nicole.
Thank you, Holly. So glad to be here with you. You guys, it's just, I love divine appointments and connections, and just major shout out to Bethany with Adkins Media, just how she just is a connector. And of course, anytime she's like, hey, you guys, you need to talk with this person or meet with this person, I'm all about it. Holly's all about it. And so we have
Yes.
Nicole here, Nicole Bowman. Hey. Well, Nicole, I mean, just like Holly said, I'm getting out of the way and I'm just so intrigued by your story and just how the Lord is using you. So, do you want to maybe share a little bit about you and your story?
Sure, I'd be glad to. I was reading this morning in my Bible, I had made a note and it said, do not be afraid of God's plan. Remember who God is and what he has done. And so I was thinking about, there's hard parts of our stories that we don't often like to dwell on, but it's good to dwell on those. It's good to remember what God has done. And I have found over the years by being vulnerable and sharing those hard parts, God is able to use that. And so my husband and I met when we were teenagers at a church that we both attended. And we got married relatively young. The church that we attended, unfortunately, was very controlling. And at times I would even refer to it as a cult. And so one of the things that they really tried to do was discourage us from having our own families so that we could spend a lot of our time, our money, our resources on their ministry. And so that's the decision that we made at a very young age due to the influences that were around us. And while I do really appreciate and admire those who make that choice because they are stepping into God's plan for their life. I don't know that we would have done that had we not been encouraged to do so. However, if it wasn't for that journey and that decision those many years ago, I would not be in the position that I am in today. And that's the director of foster care program at Oakridge. And so I can see how God's taking the hard parts of my stories and he's used it for good. My husband and I did go to the foreign mission field many times overseas to Africa and different countries around the world. And we often found ourselves in orphanages serving children. And it was such a huge blessing. And it was such a heart-wrenching thing because in my mind, I realized what a wonderful father my husband would be. And we really began to desire to have our own family. And so as that desire began to grow, a lot of stuff was happening within the church that we attended. A lot of our family was there. So getting out of it would not have been an easy thing to do on our own, but God made the way for us to get out, but not without a lot of collateral damage. And that would be many of our family would have been broken and hurt, and there was abuse that had happened. And we were sitting there with our hands just like, we have no family. We do not have children. Where do we go from here? And we were in our mid-30s, just really desiring to have our own family. At the same time, carrying a lot of burdens and a lot of heavy loads within our family. And so we began to pursue having our own biological children. There would be surgeries and doctor's appointments and then waiting. Things don't just happen overnight. And then we did look into adopting domestically, internationally, and just kind of trying to wrestle with the fact that we really wanted a family. It wasn't happening right away. Where was God taking us? My husband really just was struggling more than anybody that I've seen because, we thought had we decided at a younger age to have children, maybe it would have been possible. Long story short, in my research, God just kept taking me back to foster care. And so we were just, that's something that I just dwelled on for a while, but Didn't present it to my husband right away. We were just healing from all the hurt from church and wrestling, with who God was. And so during that time, we started attending a new church where everywhere you looked, there was pregnant women everywhere. Like, I don't know what was in their water, but it just seemed like everybody was having babies. And I, of course, was not. And I think you're a little hyper aware of things when you're in a struggle. And I remember Mother's Day. Some churches will have all the moms stand up and honor them, or all the dads stand up. And this church that we attend now, they have every woman 18 and older stand up. And they honor every woman in the church, regardless of whether they have children or not. And that was such a huge thing for me, because that was such a hard season, struggling with that waiting, for a child. And so I also was part of the women's ministry, and I was sharing my testimony about what we have come out of and the hard parts that we were dealing with. My dad was dying of brain cancer. Just life was upside down, but yet I could see God's goodness. And this lady who I didn't know came up to me, and she hugged me and said, "I believe God will give you a family." And I believed her. And I would not normally believe people when they say things like that. I'm not a fan of somebody telling you, you watch one day, you're going to have a child. You watch, you adopt, and then you'll get pregnant. I'm not okay with those things, because that's not always God's plan for somebody. But the way she said it, it was, I believe God will give you a family. And I held on to that because I really believed he would. I just didn't know what that would look like. And so, again, we were looking at adoption. We were trying to have our own. I looked at foster care, and I said to my husband, what about foster care? And he said, nope, absolutely not. There's no way. When we would go to the foreign mission field, and he would always meet a boy or a girl or a child that he would just fall in love with. And as we would leave the orphanage or leave that city, who was crying? It was my husband. Just, having a hard time leaving that child. And so we knew that attachment would be a thing for him. And so I didn't push him. You know that movie Instant Family, where the mom's on the computer and she sees all those kids and she's just like, oh, and then she mentions it to the dad and he's like, no way. And that's how it was with us. No way. Until we went to a local restaurant, and there was a table set up with pictures from our county agency of children who were in foster care that were available for adoption. And as he walked around and looked at their faces, he just kept saying, these kids need homes. These kids need homes. And I believe that's when God planted that seed for him to consider foster care. So we began taking classes to become licensed foster family. It was just like a whirlwind of emotions. How could we do this? They scare you in these classes sometimes. They tell you all the worst case scenarios. They tell you all the hard things, but they also told you the need. And so then we left there thinking, how could we not do this? How could we not? And so as we were getting licensed, we still had that. My husband still had to know we did everything we could to have our own biological children. And so in the process of getting licensed, we also were in the process of doing IVF. And so I think for us knowing, okay, we're going to do last resort on our part, but we're also going to continue pursuing foster care, and what God wants to do with it, he will. So we did IVF in 2016, at the end of May into June. We got our license for foster care in June 2016. The IVF was unsuccessful. The following month, we got our first placement, and it was a 13-month-old little boy. They said would probably go home to dad. He was doing great. And I said, fine, we'll practice, because our goal was to support families and support children. But that would be our forever son. So Grayson came to us at 13 months. His sister came
Wow.
to us a year later when she was born, and they are both now 8 and 6. We've adopted them from foster
Mm.
care. They are amazing.
Wow.
And during that time, and to this day, we have a relationship with biological mom and dad. I can't tell you what I've learned about myself and what I've learned about God through this journey into foster care. And we couldn't love our children anymore had they been biologically related to us.
Mm.
And so we had another long-term placement, a little girl who was with us for 2.5 years. She went to relatives. And then when she left, a month later, the kiddo's baby brother came to us, and he was with us for 9 months and then reunified with mom and dad. And so now we are parenting 2 biological siblings who have a full biological sibling with mom and dad. And now we are navigating a whole new area where mom and dad are expecting again. And at this point, the plan is to place him in our home for adoption, private adoption. So that's in a nutshell of our story. I could go on and on about God's goodness and about what God has done, about all the things that I've learned, but that's my story in a nutshell. Just, God's been good to us. And again, I wouldn't have this job that I have today as the foster care director at Hope Bridge had it not been for my journey through foster care. And it's a job that I absolutely love with people that I absolutely love. So
That is amazing. I there's nothing cooler to me than when you can just see, and Nicole always says this so eloquently, but like the puzzle pieces of the way God aligns what he wants for your life. And just to hear you talk about, girl, going through IVF and your foster classes, that right? Training.
yeah,
I'm like, good gravy. You were
at the
probably
same
like,
time.
that is, I don't even know. I worked for my church while I took IVF medication, and I was like, I need to not work here. I'm not being nice.
Yeah. Well, and
But that is
our
just,
facility was an hour away. So for that period
no,
of time, I
ma'am.
was driving an hour to get a shot, and it was fun.
I just, your diligence and your dedication to finding places for God's kids that need homes is amazing.
Yeah.
That is incredible. So proud of you. That is a lot.
Thank you. You know,
Yeah.
Jeremiah, the 29th chapter, the 11th verse, we always love to just share that verse, and it's encouraging. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare, not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. But we always have to remind ourselves he wrote that letter while they were in captivity. There would be 70 more years of captivity. And so I always want to remind people when they're in the hard spot, God does have a plan for you. It's a reminder that we can hold on to hope and he has plans for us, but we may still have to go through a really hard season before we get to his, where that plan, how it's going to play out. And I don't know. I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful that I can trust him for my future because he's gone before me. I can trust him with the past, even in the hard stuff, even when I question the why did you allow this or why did this happen? I don't have to question about the fact that he was good. And I don't have to question the fact that he wasn't there because he was. He was there when things weren't going the way that I thought they should go. And I'm just so grateful for that. And some of the biggest blessings in my life have come through and as a result of our journey. I'm the 2 most amazing kids ever. And I can't take any credit because I didn't birth them. So
Precious. Well, Nicole, I definitely want to ask you a quick question about your husband.
yeah.
Because I think a lot of times we always talk about, and I'm assuming he absolutely was there for you during this time. But you shared some things about him. And so what was it like for you to kind of step in and be there for him? How did you know how to support him, or how did you know to, because a lot of times when it's flipped, my husband and I, it was just like, he was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
And so how are you able to just really walk alongside him during that hard time?
It was tricky because I'm the type of person that, if I always try to see God in everything, like, okay, this is a really hard season. What is God going to do with this? And, God is always good. And whereas my husband grew up in the church that we attended, and everything that he ever believed was just now questionable. Questioning his faith in God, questioning who God is, does God care, questioning his choice that we made at a young age not to have children, and trying to just encourage him that, I'm okay. So I think I try to be strong for him and that can be hard because then I'm not allowing myself to grieve, through this. And
Right.
but just giving him space to say how he felt, to not judge him for feeling that way. And again, I mean, I didn't really want to go through IVF. I don't think that's something I thought sounded exciting, you know. And I think that for me, that was supporting him because he's the one that actually pursued getting the information on infertility doctors and doing the surgeries, and a lot of it I had to go through quite a bit of myself to do that because there was pre-surgeries for fibroids, and so I think being there for him meant that I was willing to also do those things that he thought was necessary. So I don't know. The moment he saw Grayson,
that's
though,
good, Nicole. I'm telling you that was for someone listening right now.
Yeah.
That right there was for someone listening.
Yeah.
Because I just think that that's so beautiful. And marriage is a partnership.
It is.
And so I think that, yes, we know that men have their roles, women have their roles, but also it's a partnership. And I think that your story is a beautiful example of partnership and what spouses in a godly marriage can look like and how we support each other. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes,
I will say,
while you're talking, I'm like, the submission and the trust and the respect for you to be like, I will do this because this is what we've decided together, and this will bring him peace in our next steps. I think a lot of women would be like, no, I'm not doing that. But the fact that you like laid that down is amazing.
I will say he also responded in the same way. So once we did do foster care, remember the goal is reunification. And so the first time he saw Grayson and Grayson reached for him, I knew I was in trouble because my husband was immediately smitten with this little boy. But 5 days later, we would have a family team meeting with all the people involved with the case and with the dad, the biological dad. And the dad, they had him share like the reasons why he is where he was at in life and where he understood that why his son was taken. And dad sat there and just opened his heart and just cried and shared about the things that he had heard about foster care, about foster parents, and they weren't good. And I remember when it got to my husband looked at him and said, I don't know what it's like to come from where you've come from or be in your situation or not have the support that you haven't had. But I can tell you today, you've gained a brother, and I'm here to support you. I'm here to care for your son as long as I need to. And so he joined me in that mindset of we're here to wrap around the family and care for these children, even if it's for a short time. And so for 2 years, I told him, look, he's going home, until he did it. But so it just was really cool to see him also join me on that, in that, mission to care for the family.
That's amazing. I think that's beautiful. What a beautiful picture of God's heart for us, that your husband's like, I'm here, like I'm going to step in and carry this mantle as long as it's needed. And I think that breaks so many things generationally over those kids' lives and just heals wounds they didn't even know they had.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Nicole, for just a quick moment, because the podcast is called Purpose Beyond Motherhood.
Yes.
And so just would love to, kind of get your thoughts on just, again, honoring motherhood just in different ways.
Sure.
And so, on the podcast, Holly and I, we always talk about, hey, is foster care right for you? If that's something that the Lord has placed on your heart, awesome. If adoption, awesome. But, we're definitely not saying like, oh, you can't have a baby. This
Right.
is what you're called
Right.
to do. We definitely want our listeners to know that, hey, God could have something so beautiful and perfect for them that looks different.
Sure.
And maybe just women don't know like how can they honor motherhood, in different ways.
Yeah, so I think it's so important to realize that we have the ability as women to speak into the lives of others in many, many ways. Whether you're serving in missions, whether you're serving your church, whether you're a mentor to other women younger than you, I think a lot of times our identity lies in our titles. I'm a teacher, or I'm a mom, or I'm a sister, or I'm whatever it is that we identify with, and remembering that our identity really lies in Christ, because our other titles change. We may be a mom, or we may not be a mom. We may be a grandma or not, a sister. We may not be. We may be a teacher. We may have this occupation that we care for. But our identity ultimately lies in who God is and as a child of God. And I think if we can hold on to that, He will direct us into the work that He's called us to do, whether it's caring for vulnerable children, whether they're in our home, or whether we're serving in other capacities. And that's something that within our organization at Hope Bridge, we always say, everybody is called to care for the vulnerable. Everybody can do foster care. Not everybody has to be a foster parent. And so while, I have had children in my home as a foster mom, the next person may just be that person who's supporting those families by doing respite care, or by serving those families a meal, or by being a mentor to those children. So there's so many ways that we can serve others and serve God. That doesn't necessarily mean we are home caring for babies as a mom in that way. So that's just a huge part of what we do, is trying to engage others into this field in some capacity. And isn't necessarily you have to be a foster mom or an adoptive mom, because that's really hard work too.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. So you just, again, using your gifts and talents, or one, discovering your gifts and talents and seeing, how God wants to use you, and then just using those gifts to glorify Him. So
each of us have purpose. Each of us have a life that's worth giving to God and worth sharing with others. And again, our value doesn't lie in our titles. Our value lies in who God's made us to be. And there's a lot of work to be done in His kingdom that isn't necessarily changing diapers or, putting kids to bed. Although those are worthy, that's worthy work too. But
I also have to say one more thing. At the beginning, when you talked about what the woman said to you at church, when she said, I believe God will give you a family. I love that, because it doesn't confine the promise that's waiting for someone.
Yeah.
I think it's so beautiful to hold on to the fact that it might not be what you think, but God is listening. And if you'll open your heart, He can move where you'll let Him. So I love that. I love that she worded it like that. I think that's
I did too. And that's probably why I remember it, because I am sure, and I know there's people who've mentioned things to the effect, you'll get a foster care, then you'll get pregnant, or there's people who said those things. I don't remember who they are, but I remember what she said, and I've held on to that all these years.
Absolutely. I love that.
And I try to do that too when I'm talking with other women sitting across the table from me who are struggling with infertility, and I can't get pregnant, and I don't say, I just say, God knows. He has a plan, and
it's good.
Father knows. So good.
Amen.
Nicole, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. We are so grateful for you.
Thank you for having me.
So really quickly, how can you just let us know really quick, how can people find you online or Hope Bridge online? All the things.
Yeah, so there's two ways you can find me on social media. That's through Foster Our Community, which is the foster care program. It's merging that program into Hope Bridge. So at Foster Our Community or at Hope Bridge, Ohio. And our website is hopebridgeohio.org. So you can find me both those places.
Awesome. Nicole, again, thank you so much. You
Thank
guys, we
you.
will put all of that info in the show notes and everything. But thank you just for being
Yeah.
here. Thank you guys for listening. And Purpose Beyond Motherhood, we come out on the third Monday of every month. So save the date, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you so much, ladies.
Yes.